My name is Lauren Mitchell. Before I became someone's wife and mother, I was an accountant. Not the kind who just enters numbers into spreadsheets. I was the person partners at the firm would bring their messy files to at the end of a long day and say, "Lauren, can you take a look? Something doesn't feel right." I had an eye for it. The kind of eye that catches when numbers are lying before the math even catches up. I loved that work. I loved the feeling when everything finally balanced after I had untangled the mess. When I understood that someone had hidden something, and I could prove it with numbers. It gave me a sense of control in a world where so much is out of your hands. When I got married, I thought I could keep a part of myself. But gradually the work I was proud of faded into the background. I became the wife who runs the house, and the mother who organizes everything. And for a while, I thought that was enough. I convinced myself it was temporary. That when Noah got older, I would be able to go back. But time passed, and I sank deeper into the role someone else had chosen for me. 8 years ago, I married Jason Mitchell. He was charming and ambitious, building something in real estate. We had an unspoken agreement, though we never called it that out loud. He would handle the money, the deals, the growth. I would handle the home, the child we wanted, the life that made all his work meaningful. It felt fair then. It felt like love. I wanted to believe it was love, when one person builds the outer world and the other keeps the inner one in balance. When Noah was born, Jason sat on the edge of the hospital bed and told me gently that he wanted me to stay home. He needs his mother, not some stranger raising him while we both work. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. So I left the firm I loved and the work I was good at, and became a full-time mom and household manager. I ran our life with the same precision I once brought to ledgers, budgets, schedules, shopping lists that actually made sense. I was good at it. Very good. For a while, it was enough. But slowly something began to shift. Jason started coming home later and later. First it was important client meetings. Then it was just late. The nights he missed bedtime stories became more common. I started noticing how he avoided looking me in the eye when he came home. How quickly he went to shower. How rarely he touched me. How his stories about his day became more vague and shorter. I kept telling myself it was work stress. Real estate is brutal. Everyone says so. I got very good at convincing myself. But somewhere deep down something else was already accumulating. A quiet, cold vigilance. I began noticing small things I had ignored before. The smell on his shirt. Late messages he didn't answer right away. The way he stopped talking about the future. The way he laughed less at home. I remember one evening especially clearly because it rearranged something inside me permanently. Noah had this big dinosaur book with fold-out pages he loved. He asked Jason that morning if he would read it before bed. Jason promised. Noah sat by the front window in his pajamas, the book in his lap, watching every set of headlights that came down the street. I stood in the dark kitchen watching him, my chest tightening every time a car slowed and then kept going. Noah didn't complain. He just sat and waited. I looked at his small back and thought about how he was growing and how little time his father spent with him. When Jason finally came home hours later, he smelled like expensive floral perfume that wasn't mine, something heavy and costly. Perfume I had never owned. He didn't apologize. He didn't even mention our son. He just said it had been a rough day and went straight to bed. I lay awake in the dark for a long time after he fell asleep. Numbers kept turning in my head the way they used to at work. Only now they weren't someone else's books. They were my life. And I was beginning to understand that somewhere in those numbers there were hidden line items I hadn't seen yet. I started feeling something new growing inside me, not just hurt, but a cold, methodical desire to get to the bottom of it. I started thinking about it as a problem that needed solving. Only not with shouting, but with numbers. Then one afternoon, looking for my passport for a trip that never happened, I opened the wrong drawer in his home office. There were bank notices rubber-banded together. Past due. Large amounts. I kept looking. More letters. A construction loan on a property he had bragged about at a dinner party months earlier as fully paid off. It wasn't. The company was quietly bleeding money while he smiled at events and told stories about success. My stomach went cold the same way it used to at work when a client's books didn't reconcile, and I already knew someone had been creative with the truth. I photographed every page with my phone, making sure the details were clear, then put everything back exactly as I found it. I went back to the kitchen and started making dinner. That night, I stopped being just a wife and became, once again, an accountant who happened to live in the same house as the problem. Only now the problem was mine. And I knew I couldn't afford to make a mistake in my calculations. I started thinking about it like an audit. Only this time I was auditing my own life. I began mentally drafting the first lines of a future balance sheet, what I had, what was hidden, and what I could do with it. A few months later, I was helping sort old files for shredding. Jason trusted me with the boring administrative stuff because he had stopped seeing me as someone who understood business. In one box, I found a home equity loan application against our house. My signature was on it. But it wasn't my signature. The way the letters connected was wrong. I know my own handwriting, the small habits no one else notices. There was another one later that same day, different lender, another large amount. Forged. I sat on the office floor with those papers in my lap and did nothing. Not because I was scared, but because I needed to see the full picture before I moved. Forgery is serious. If I blew everything up too early, I might lose the chance to protect Noah from whatever came next. So I waited. I watched. I documented everything with the same care I once used on audit work papers. I thought about it like reconciling a balance sheet. Only now I had to gather every hidden line item before drawing conclusions. Sometimes I woke up in the middle of the night and wondered if what I was doing was right. If staying silent was the correct choice. If using my son as a reason to keep everything inside was fair to him. But then I would look at him sleeping and understand that the chaos that could start right now would hurt him far more than my silence ever could. I chose silence. But that silence was not passive. It was active. I was collecting evidence. I was building a case. I started keeping a separate notebook where I wrote down dates, names, and amounts. No one knew about that notebook except me. For 3 years I lived 2 lives. In one I was mom, packing lunches, helping with homework, reading dinosaur books, pretending everything was normal for our son. In the other I quietly built a file. I watched his affair partner's name appear on the shared calendar more and more often. I saw her once at a company holiday party, carrying a bag that anyone who had ever worked retail could tell was fake at a glance. Jason's mother took to her immediately. She wrapped an arm around her in front of everyone, laughing, while she sent me, her daughter-in-law of almost 8 years, into the kitchen to help with appetizers. I stood there holding a tray of stuffed mushrooms, watching through the doorway as she introduced a 26-year-old to her friends with more warmth than she had ever shown me. That moment stayed with me for a long time. Not just hurt. Clarity. I understood that for them, I had already been furniture for years. Another time I almost broke. Noah got sick and Jason didn't come home even for the night. I sat beside my son with a damp cloth on his forehead and thought that if I spoke now, Noah would be left without a father at the worst possible moment. I held back. But in my head, the plan was already forming. Another time I heard Jason laughing on the phone in another room and caught fragments of the conversation that left no doubt. I stood in the hallway clenching my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. But I didn't walk in. I went back to the kitchen and continued making dinner. Because I knew the time had not come yet. One more time Noah asked me why his dad was hardly ever home. I said his dad worked a lot. Noah nodded and didn't ask again. But I saw something in his eyes that made me clench my teeth even harder and keep waiting. I understood that I had to finish this in a way that wouldn't hurt Noah more than he had already been hurt. Then one evening Jason sat me down at the kitchen island with that confident posture he used when closing deals. He wanted a divorce. He wanted the house, the cars, the company, everything. When I asked about Noah, he said the words that still echo. You can keep the kid. I'm not interested in custody battles. Not our son. Not Noah. Just the kid. I felt something in my chest go very still. Not pain. Not even surprise. Just cold, clear understanding. Our son had become, in a single sentence, a line item he was declining to take. The next few days, I moved like I was in a fog. I gathered the evidence I already had and thought about how to use it. I knew I couldn't just hand everything over. But I also didn't want a public scandal that would touch Noah. I started thinking about it like a final reconciliation. Only now the stakes were higher than they had ever been. I began imagining how everything could end and what I would do if the plan didn't work. I prepared a backup option. But the main plan was simple and brutal. I hired Rebecca Hayes. I laid everything out. The debts I had tracked, the forged documents with photos and dates, the evidence of the affair I had quietly gathered. She listened, took notes in that impossibly neat handwriting, and said we could fight for half. I asked her, half of what? Half of millions in liabilities that hadn't even been properly disclosed? That's when the real strategy took shape. Under Texas community property rules in divorce, if the agreement is written carefully, the person who takes the assets can also be required to take on the liabilities attached to them. We spent weeks drafting a long settlement agreement. Buried in the middle, in one dense paragraph that looked like all the others, was the clause stating that whoever receives the marital assets assumes full personal responsibility for all debts, liens, and obligations tied to those assets. I took part in shaping the wording. I wanted everything clean and precise, like a good balance sheet. Rebecca sometimes smiled when I suggested phrasing. She said I thought like an accountant even in family matters. I told her that was exactly why we were going to win. We discussed every word. I wanted everything to be irreversible. Jason's lawyer pushed for a quick hearing. There was already a foreclosure auction scheduled on the main property, and Jason apparently believed that finalizing the divorce first would somehow shield him. He was in a hurry. In court, he waived his right to any independent financial review with a laugh, saying he built the company and didn't need anyone checking his numbers. He signed the pages. His lawyer saw the clause too late. The color drained from Jason's face when he realized what he had just agreed to. The judge stayed calm. She pointed out that everything had been disclosed in writing, he had waived review on the record, and the court would not protect him from his own decisions. Within days, the lenders moved forward. The company went into bankruptcy. Because I had waited until after the settlement was final and unchangeable, we could then bring forward the forged documents without risking the agreement. An investigation began. Jason eventually accepted a plea deal on the forgery charges. His real estate career was finished. The woman he had been seeing left as soon as the bankruptcy news broke. His mother stopped calling. What I walked away with was simple but everything that mattered. My son, my name clean on every document that counted, a modest place to start over that Rebecca helped secure separately, and my old profession back. The firm I had left years earlier brought me in part-time once they understood what I had actually been quietly managing all that time. Noah is older now. He reads the dinosaur book himself. He doesn't ask about his father much anymore. When he does, I tell him the truth in a way a child can carry, that his dad made serious mistakes, but none of them were Noah's fault. Sometimes I look at him and think about how much strength it took for me to stay silent for 3 years. How many times I wanted to scream. But I didn't scream. I waited. And that turned out to be stronger than any scandal. I understood that sometimes the loudest answer is silence backed by preparation. I understood that I could be stronger than I thought. And that sometimes the best way to protect a child is not to explode, but to plant everything so that someone else explodes instead. I ran into Jason's old lawyer once at a conference. He was polite, but I could see he still didn't fully understand how it had happened. Sometimes Rebecca and I get coffee. She raises her cup and says, "To the fine print." I raise mine back and say, "To actually reading what you sign." Jason wanted everything, the house, the cars, the company, all of it. I gave him exactly what he asked for. He just never thought to ask what came attached to it.